Hello, welcome to the module on chapter 4. And the questions that I am going to discuss are: what are some of the phrases that a person might use who's operating in the mode of learned helplessness? So, first, learned helplessness reflects passive behavior that results from negative events beyond the sufferer's control. An example that was used in the text is mice that are shocked, but they have no way to escape the shock. Later, when they try to teach them how to avoid the shock, most of the mice didn't even try. They were apathetic, listless, and they didn't do anything. Likewise, with people, if they continually suffer negative effects that are beyond their control, then a good number of them will not even try to avoid those negative effects because they've learned helplessness. A real life example is pessimistic people who attribute their setbacks to their own inadequacies rather than external forces. So it makes me think of George on Seinfeld. He always pointed out to his own self, and whenever anything went wrong, he looked to himself. And that's learned helplessness in people. Now, going back to the question, examples of phrases that a person suffers from learned helplessness might use are: why bother? There's no point in doing anything about it because it's beyond their control. So they say, why bother? They might also say, what's the difference? If I do something, if I don't do something, I get the same negative result. Another phrase is, I can't do anything about it, so why should I even try? There's that old phrase, if you at first you don't succeed, try again. Well, this is the opposite of that. I can't do anything about it, so I shouldn't even try. I believe Homer Simpson said, if you try something and you fail, the lesson you learn is don't even try. Lastly, there's another phrase is there's no way to avoid it. Sometimes people feel that they're going to get the negative consequence no matter what they do. So they feel there's no way to avoid it. In each of these phrases, the person feels that their situation is out of their control and they cannot do anything to avoid it. As a result, like the mice, they passively accept the situation. And that is one of the consequences of learned helplessness. Now, the next question I'm going to read is: rationalization is a mechanism fraught with consequences. List some negative consequences of rationalization in the following areas: school, work, home, and relationships. Now, rationalization is a defense mechanism where someone creates a plausible but false or fake excuse to justify their unacceptable behavior. An example: someone stealing something because they say, oh, you know, uh, I'm hungry and I don't have enough money, so I should just steal it. Okay. We see that a lot, shoplifters. Okay. Now, going back to the question, a negative consequence of rationalization in school would be not learning the material because you cheated and you rationalized you didn't have time to study. I didn't have time to study, so I got to cheat. And you did it. The negative consequence is you didn't learn any of the material. Other negative consequences of school is, you know, I already know the material, so I can skip class. Skipping class is not good. You should never do that. But you've rationalized it to say, I already know the material. There's no point in going to class. So the next one would be an example of rationalization or a negative consequence of work where you produce substandard work and you rationalize, well, I should take a shortcut because everybody does it. So you've taken the shortcut, and the negative consequence is you produce substandard work. In many cases, this may not matter, but in some cases it might. So, for example, you forgot to check a box, or you didn't complete the form adequately and it gets rejected. There are lots of times where bad paperwork can result in real life negative consequences. Another thing is, uh, you show up late to work because you're like, I never do anything in the first half hour of work anyway, so it doesn't matter if I'm there. Negative consequences: people at work think you're a bad employee because you're showing up late, you're not showing up on time, and then they think that. And again, you've rationalized why you shouldn't, or why it doesn't matter that you didn't go to work. Now, a negative consequence at home would be, for example, not doing the dishes and letting them stay in the sink. And you just rationalize, oh, I'm tired, I can do it tomorrow. Doesn't matter. Well, sometimes things like a dirty home reflect your own internal mind and well being. And if you live in a home, you can suffer the negative consequences if it's always dirty. So that's bad. Also, not fixing things at home. You may say, oh, that light bulb, I don't need to change it because it doesn't matter. But it could create a serious situation with the electricity where maybe that should have been fixed or should have been changed. And when you really need that light on and you try to turn on, it's dark, you didn't do it. Then negative consequences with relationships would be destroying the relationship. For example, if you cheat on your significant other because you think they don't know, and as long as they don't know, it won't hurt them. But if they find out, boom, your relationship crashes. Lying in a relationship because you lie and you rationalize, hey, I'm protecting the other person. So I don't have to tell them, I wrecked the car or that thing was stolen or I lost all my money or I have some negative habit like gambling or drugs. It hurts the situation because now you've rationalized it in a way where you lie. And then later on, you either have to build on those lies or the other person finds out and the relationship is over. And so those are some negative consequences. And that, rationalization goes on and on and on. There are many ways that you rationalize things every day. And it's a coping mechanism. And this week we're learning about coping mechanisms, the same with learned helplessness. But these are both negative coping mechanisms because they don't make the situation better. For example, with learned helplessness, you don't learn how to escape the situation. In fact, you've accepted the situation. So it becomes fixated on you that now that you maybe deserve that negative situation. And then people have got to learn how to overcome that learned helplessness. They got to learn to go out there and find a solution or accept the solution if it's presented in front of them. With rationalization, you excuse your bad behavior by rationalizing it. And sometimes it probably is okay because no major negative consequence happens, but there could be major negative consequences later on. Like I said, destroyed relationships. Someone at school could discover you cheated, and then you get kicked out or you flunk the course, and then you have a permanent record of that harm. So if you work in rationalization, it probably does have its place because so many of us do it. But you have to learn the boundaries, and it's probably more profitable or better for you psychologically to engage in other coping mechanisms that don't involve rationalization or don't involve as much. And it probably would be better if you just curbed bad behavior because you shouldn't be doing it over and over and over again. And the more you rationalize it, because it could lead down that slippery slope where you rationalize worse and worse behavior. We see it in movies all the time where, someone does something small in the beginning and then later on they do more and more and more and eventually it just blows up in their face and everybody knows about it. And, it just becomes a problem. And yes, that's a movie and that's not real, but it's a good example of how you should minimize these coping mechanisms like that. So that is my review for the week and my forum posting. Thank you. I appreciate any comments and see you again next week.